Hello, everybody. This is Rob Fredette with the podcast HODGEPOD, and I have a return guest who was on my last episode. But what happened was we had such a great conversation. The second half did not record. Flobo Boyce joins me, and he is gracious enough in his busy schedule to join me to talk MLB baseball parks, the bucket list. We're going to talk about his visit to Cooperstown, the recent Hall of Fame inductees, and just baseball and all that good stuff. So, Flobo, welcome to my podcast again, and thank you for fitting me in because I don't know what happened last time.
I'm just glad I was invited a second time. Usually I go on the show, people go, thanks, but no thanks, don't come back. But this is a lot of fun.
You were dynamite, man. I loved it. It was awesome. It was awesome. So we talked about some ballparks in the previous episode, but while I was getting ready for tonight, I had thought about back in 1982, my father got my brother and I tickets to go see the 1982 All-Star Game in Montreal Olympic Stadium. And I guess I could put that on the list for visiting a stadium, but that was a tremendous experience for me. I'll never forget it. It was the 82 All-Star Game, and I'm wearing my commemorative hat. I haven't worn it in 42 years, but that was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. And if you ever have a chance, Flobo, to go to an All-Star Game, it is absolutely lights out.
I was so close to going in 23. I went to end up going to Seattle in April instead of July, but I was like, oh man, I could have just waited or rearranged my schedule. That's the closest I've been. Not sure if I'm going this year, but you're absolutely right. You have to go to Home Run Derby. You have to go to an All-Star Game. It's kind of sad that when it was in Dodger Stadium, which is my local park here, I had no inkling to go because parking was so bad. But I'll go one time.
That is unbelievable. I just found that to be that All-Star Game. Dave Concepcion, I remember, hit a home run in left field, and we did sit in the left field area. I remember that home run. I remember Olympic Stadium, a massive stadium, massive concourses, and the game was tremendous. And just real quick, here are some of the players, the starters for the AL and NL. Dennis Eckersley was the starting pitcher. Carlton Fisk was the catcher with the White Sox. Cecil Cooper, Bobby Grich of the Angels, George Brett, Robin Yount, Ricky Henderson, Fred Lynn, and Reggie Jackson were the American League All-Stars. The National League All-Stars, now it was Montreal. You had 4 All-Stars in the starting lineup for the Expos, and the Expos in the early 80s were just dynamite. Steve Rogers was the starting pitcher. Gary Carter, one of the greatest catchers of all time. Pete Rose, Manny Trio, Mike Schmidt, Dave Concepcion, who won the MVP that year, Tim Rock Raines, Andre Dawson, and Dale Murphy. So those are pretty hefty All-Stars back in 1982. I kind of had fun looking at that today.
It's interesting because at the time, I was born after that. So it's kind of funny. Those people were all legends by the time I came around. That's kind of cool. You get to see him play live.
That is, I remember that game because Tim Raines played for the Yankees after his time in Montreal. Then Andre Dawson had some great years with the Chicago Cubs. Dale Murphy won back-to-back MVPs in the 80s, and he's still not in the Hall of Fame, which I think he should be. But the Expos in the early 80s, now they're the Washington Nationals, they had a tremendous lineup up and down from 1 through 9. They got close in the playoffs and hopefully to get to the playoffs. They never could crack that, get to the World Series. And they also had another outfielder, Ellis Valentine, who was a tremendous player as well. But great All-Stars back then, and the All-Star Game is always fun to watch, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is kind of the last bastion of what we all thought baseball to be. Like, I know that it's an evolution and we all impart our own nostalgia to things, but the idea in the middle of the summer, like guys play an exhibition game, you come out with your hot dog, all over the country come together to support the game and not a certain team is always great. I will say this though, the 80s Expos teams, things I've only saw on film. By the time I came around, just for context, the Expos had to become a joke. It was like, oh, Canadians don't care about baseball. No one's going to the games. But it seems very much that wasn't the case at one time. And I wonder if that country, if Canada, could support a second team in the future.
I think they could. They were really a great team in the 80s. I mean, they got close. That outfield of Tim Raines, Andre Dawson, and Ellis Valentine was just off the charts. And Gary Carter, of course, played with the Mets in the 86 World Series, so he was a tremendous catcher. But those Expos teams and those uniforms were just classic uniforms.
Absolutely. That red, white, blue, can't match that. Can't beat that at all.
And that stadium, Olympic Stadium, was the stadium used in the 1976 Olympics. So they converted it to a baseball stadium like they did in Atlanta with Turner Field. They made that into a baseball stadium as well. So
did you sit up close, or did you go? Were you in the rafters? Like, where did you sit?
We sat in the left field bleachers right near the foul line. I remember we were probably about 15 rows up, but it was just being there was just incredible. Like when you're growing up as a teenager and you're watching your all-stars, you've grown up when you're a kid, it was just phenomenal. Like Mike Schmidt, Dave Concepcion, Pete Rose. Yeah, the left field, I remember the crowd was going crazy. And it was just a tremendous event. And the National League was always kicking the AL's butt every year back then. I mean, it was all NL all the time.
Yeah, the senior circuit mattered. Like until pitchers started throwing 300 miles per hour or with bionic elbows that had to get reconstructed. The NL was like a big deal because it was such a managerial, strategic kind of ball that it was kind of fun to watch. I was holding on to no DH for the longest time, and I goes, yeah, we have to switch that really recently. But I thought the NL circuit was so strong for a reason.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk a little bit about some parks we didn't talk about last time, and I'm looking forward to, my wife and I have decided we're going to go check out Cincinnati this year to go see the Reds play, Elly De La Cruz. So I don't know if you've been watching baseball last year. Before the Reds, Elly De La Cruz came on board. They were not drawing, but they were selling out games left and right last year. So he is like the new sensation in baseball.
Yeah, I'll swear on a plate of Skyline chili. Look, going into the last season, we thought the Cardinals would be on top, and since you'd be an afterthought, and the other thing happened, it flip-flopped, which is crazy. Haven't seen a team that young. I know they say they're ahead of schedule. I don't quite believe in that. I feel like it's a fight every year, but they are trending upwards. Cincinnati has a nice young core. It's a fun kind of ball. We haven't seen that since the last days of the Big Red Machine, right? So I got to say that, man. I'm excited. I want to go see them this year. I've had the chance to. I want to put that on my schedule. Let's see if it works out.
Yeah, I cannot wait. We're going to try to fit in a Bengals game once the football schedule comes out. I think they come out in March in the NFL, so we're going to try to hopefully fit a Reds game and a Bengals game. But I can't wait to add another ballpark to that list. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to that and seeing De La Cruz play. That should be fun. So what are the
How many parks would that be if you go? If you go, be 30, 40?
Well, now I had 18, but I didn't count Olympic Park last time, so it's 19. It'll be 20. Be 20. And I know Olympic Stadium's not around anymore, but nonetheless, I have to check that off the list because I did see a game there, but it'll be 20 with Cincinnati this year, so inching a little bit closer. So you went to Cooperstown, didn't you, recently? What was that like?
I did. I went to Cooperstown in January.
Nice.
I'm not sure that was. Why did you stop me, Rob? You could have been like, that was a bad thing.
No, that's nice.
It's kind of a full circle moment. So I graduated at Flagler College. In fact, I'm wearing the sweatshirt here. It's a small liberal arts college in Florida. And two of my communication professors had did a documentary about baseball scouts. It's called Fielding Dreams, a celebration of baseball scouts. So I had them on my podcast, I do Amsterdam radio. They let slip, hey, look, we are going to screen this film for the first time at the theater at the Baseball Hall of Fame. And they said, look, it's going to be us. It's kind of weird if we introduce it. Since you're a master of ceremonies, would you want to come out, introduce the film, and then do a Q&A? And I was like, oh, yeah, cool. Why not go and write out the entire trip? So I'm from Brooklyn, but I mean, I haven't really been in that part of the state. So flew into Syracuse in January. I make sure I have my hat and gloves and mittens, right? Because my blood has thinned out living here in Los Angeles. Got a 4x4, smart move, because Cooperstown, even though Cooperstown itself is a bigger town for that region, it's essentially rural. It's like this colonial, Sleepy Hollow, early American vibe for miles. So I totally understand the appeal of the old school ball, but it was so much fun to see old and new clash. The hall is amazing. The different exhibits, I was surprised about the kind of exhibits I didn't think there would be. There's one for video games, one for board games, one for the Savannah Bananas. I mean, it's massive, man.
What was the one or two takeaways you got from there, from like the early part of baseball, like the 40s or 50s? Is there anything that's special there when you go to Cooperstown?
In I mean this with all due respect, and that is the baseball is a reflection of the country, right? So like how we say when I was a kid, they said baseball was America's pastime, and it's not untrue, but I do think now we have our cell phones and football's getting bigger and baseball's kind of in the mix, but not quite the thing. But I realized walking the halls that it is a reflection of the good and bad of America. Yeah, there was segregation. Yeah, the women's leagues were kind of sideshows. Yeah, we treated our foreign players kind of ill until they started making money for us. And yeah, okay, our minor league developmental camps are kind of exploitive. But at the same time, it has been a bridge to gap for different cities, different cultures. It kept people employed. The park boom in the jewel box era, post Camden Yards, shows about American innovation or using American materials in plans. So like I realize there is a parallel to the maturation of the USA with our National Baseball Hall of Fame. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, and you know what's fascinating? I think we talked about the last time when you go to a game, you have different cross sections of society, and everybody's there for the main cause of watching the game, and everybody's there to have a great time. And we talked about it, like going to the ballpark, pulling in, seeing people walk in, the buzz around the concourse, the buzz before the game, batting practice, seeing the players throw, run, do their sprints, they're warming up. And then you get the buzz of the introductions and the players running out. It's all like a ceremony, pretty much. It's all like you go to Seattle, you go to LA, you go to Houston, you're going to see the same model, but you're going to see it in different parts of the country. And I think that's what makes baseball great.
You know what? You're absolutely right. But I do like the fact that they still find the time to make their own flavors to it. You know, you go to Seattle and there's all the video boards have tridents and waves. We go to LA, they're playing Randy Newman. It's enough differences to make it fun. But yeah, there is kind of like that, kind of like seeing a bit of home in different cities all across the country. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And Houston, I've been to, the Minute Maid Park several times, and I always loved it when you go there. When it's closed, when they got that roof closed, it is loud. It is unbelievable how loud that place is when the roof is closed and you have the train when they hit the home run and the Crawford boxes. Sitting out in the Crawford boxes is great. I mean, you're so close. I went to see a game back, 2010. Josh Hamilton was in the outfield. I thought that was just like he was at the top of the game right then. And it was just amazing. Yeah. Your eyes are fixated on great players like that. Josh Hamilton, Lennox Bergman. You see all these guys play, and now that they're retired, it's nice to say that you did see them play. I think that's great.
I actually had the pleasure of going this past year, and it was a day in late August, so the roof was closed because humidity was like 3,000%, and it was dark because it was raining all day. And I guess because it was dark outside and the roof was closed, it was almost like a sensory overload. The lights seemed brighter, the food seemed tastier, things did seem louder. It was full on intense. But the coffee boxes are always a good time. You meet so many friends out there, you know.
I know, yeah, and it's crazy out there too. It's like not as crazy as sitting out in left field at Yankee Stadium, but it's a lot of fun. My wife's sister lives in the Houston area, and we used to go to games with them all the time. And we were walking to one of the games, I forget what year it was, and Drayton McLean, who was the owner at the time, just happened to be walking in. He was walking in with a suitcase, and I have a picture here. We took a picture with the owner of the Houston Astros. They said, "Hey, can we get a picture with you?" He said, "Sure." And he's got his briefcase. He's actually walking into the game. I'm all about, if I see somebody, I'm like, hey, what's going on? Can I get one? I'm one of those guys.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, for better or worse, right?
Yeah. Well, you know,
probably have blueprints for new state or something.
I try to keep it low on the low down now. So, but this Cooperstown, that must have been.
You're lucky, by the way. I was going to jump in. You're lucky because I always remember someone after I see them. I'm like, I wonder who that was. Oh crap! It was that guy. You know what I mean? Totally.
Yeah, I remember one time I was in 2003. I was traveling. I was working in the food service, and I was had a layover in Atlanta. It was 2003 or 2004, and I'm just sitting there at the gate, and all of a sudden I see these people walking with suitcases and stuff. And it was Chipper Jones and it was Javi Lopez, and they were coming back from the All-Star game, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I was like, "Whoa!" And like I didn't go up to him, but I thought that was pretty. It's like you see those guys, it's like, "Whoa, that's incredible." I was like.
Well, you know, as a Mets fan, every time I see Chipper Jones, I got to say, Larry.
He was a great player, though. He was a great player. Speaking of the Hall of Fame, we have 3 new inductees this year: Adrian Beltre, Joe Mauer, and Todd Helton. I think they got the 3 of those guys great into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was shocked that Adrian Beltre did not go unanimously. Had the pleasure of also seeing him this last past November. He's a co-owner, co-minority owner of Baseball United as well. So congrats to him. And I remember on MLB Network Radio on Sirius XM, I listened to that religiously. There was that big debate about whether or not the Coors Field contingent was going to hurt against Melton. So that was kind of cool to see that, we are changing when it comes down to who's eligible to go to the Hall. I think this year is pretty pivotal. Joe Mauer too. Like, here's somebody that was a catcher and did fantastically well, but you can tell in all these baseball forums and websites, everyone's using him as they let this guy in, because it's shifting. It's different. Pitchers don't go 9 innings anymore. You know what I mean? Batters don't have 25-year careers anymore. So we're really about to see what that means. And it's kind of cool to see that shift in real time. I know some guys got left out. I know some guys got close. My guy, David Wright, got 7%. I'll take it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's happy times.
When you think about these 3 players personified what baseball is all about, you didn't hear about anything about with performance-enhancing drugs. Todd Helton was a quarterback at the University of Tennessee. Joe Mauer could have played football at Florida State. He was an unbelievable athlete in basketball and baseball and football. And then Adrian Beltre, he was just a tremendous player, started out with the Dodgers and then had that great run with the Rangers. When you look at those players, I think they got it right. And it's nice to see Todd Helton get in as a Rocky, because those Rocky teams in the mid-'90s with Larry Walker, they were pretty potent punch. Vinny Castilla and Dante Bichette. Unbelievable power lineup for the Rockies. And it's amazing they didn't do very well or get to the playoffs a lot when they had that lineup.
There are certain teams, also Tampa Bay, right? They seem quintessentially 90s. As a Mets fan, we cross paths the Rocks a lot of times, and they always seem to have our number. It always seemed like the Marlins or the Rockies always did, because they did play pretty aggressively. Coors Field for a couple of years was a fortress, and I'm so glad that we are now open to getting people from that team. Because you can imagine now, right? If people are saying, "Oh man, Coors Field inflates their numbers," if I'm a young player, why would I want to get signed to the Rocks? You know what I mean? So, I do think the day is coming. They haven't been to the World Series yet. I do think the day is coming, maybe even before the Mariners. Hot take, but it's cool to see that they have something to celebrate today.
Yeah, it's the tremendous class. And then Jim Leland was inducted into the Hall of Fame as a manager when I was working in Florida at Pro Player Stadium. Marlins won the World Series that year, and that was just insane. That whole experience of working the World Series, each series they played the Giants in the wild card round, and they beat the Giants with Barry Bonds, and then they played the Braves, who had that stacked lineup: Ryan Klesko, Chipper Jones, you name it, they had it. Tommy Glavine, Greg Maddux, John Smoltz. I mean, those guys were high powered, and the Marlins just won in 7 games. They won 7 games in Atlanta. Just a tremendous experience. But Jim Leland, he had some great runs with Pittsburgh and Detroit, so he definitely is a great inductee as well.
Yeah, congrats to those that got inducted this year. Was there anyone that didn't make it you were shocked about or kind of wishing they got pushed through?
Well, I don't have the list in front of me, but I'm still surprised that players, you don't even hear an inkling of Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Mark McGwire. You don't hear anything about any of those guys. Nothing. Mm-hmm. I find it kind of,
I think that's going to be something that's going to change over time. I do think that those individuals, even though I'm not the biggest Clemens fan, I do think they will be inducted via committee sometime in the future, because things are shifting. You look at Pete Rose, even though it's a little different when you're on the field and then betting, I think it's kind of incredulous to say, "Hey, look, man, you betted on baseball. There's no way you could be in the Hall of Fame." Brought to you part by BetMGM. You know what I mean? Because sports are totally into that, right? So I do think those men will get there. I'm not sure how or when. I do think it may take a generation for newer writers to come in and supplant the older ones. But I'm not concerned about those guys eventually getting to the Hall. And that said, though, it's also a museum. I mean, the museum itself takes very care to say this was the PED era of baseball. And they actually have a display about how throughout the course of history of baseball, how people use different gamesmanship and enhancements to get an advantage. Like baseball, the museum is very open about that. So I do think it's a matter of time.
Yeah, and one player was Gary Sheffield. Had us played with the Yankees, the Marlins, and also the Padres. Kind of thought he would get in, but I think he'll get in eventually. He was a great player, tremendous power hitter, had all the tools in the outfield as well. And I think he'll eventually get in. I was kind of surprised he did not get in. I remember one game in the Marlins in the mid-'90s. They were playing the Phillies, and they were down 7-3, and the bases were loaded in the bottom of the ninth, and he jacked out a grand slam to tie it. I'll never forget it. It was incredible.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he was
the clutch factor's real.
Yeah, he was a clutch player. Yeah, it's just interesting that the players that expected of performance, you just don't – it's like they're non-existent in some respect.
Right. I understand that. And here is my thing about Halls of Fame in general. Taking a step back because I'm also a pro wrestling fan. I think that's a better example because wrestling itself is scripted, is that there's always a debate about who should go in, who's first ballot, who is not in, who deserves to go in. All Hall of Fames are arbitrary to some degree because you have to decide who has more value, even though stats can change. But that said, you can't delete 15 years of baseball just because of something else. If you have to do an asterisk, if you can, if you have to do like this came in this era, do that. But you look at, especially with Barry Bonds, I mean, he had a Hall of Fame career before he got any kind of suspicion of PEDs. So again, I do think there's going to be a time when those men will be inducted. I'm just not sure when.
Yep, I agree. That's a good point. It might be a generation. Talking about the gambling part, I mean, 30 years ago, you would never hear about gambling at all on TV. And then also there was never a thought or an inkling, and it was kind of like a cardinal sin not to put a professional sports team in Las Vegas just because of the gambling. I mean, I remember that.
Absolutely.
It's just incredible how times have changed, and like you can't go anywhere on the radio or television without hearing about a gambling app or, gamble this, gamble that. And it's just saturated now to the point where it's out of control.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is kind of hilarious where like you have the betting apps sponsoring post-game reports, or they're actually talking about the money line before a game. You're like, wait a minute, this is like you would think that like shady gangsters would say in a back room somewhere about the vig and the spread and all that. But yeah, I mean, that's just a sign of the times. Vegas is a perfect example. I think they've tried and to double dip back into gambling and gaming, and try to go back into that specifically, and people have moved on. It's kind of like it's a thing to do when money's good, but there's less money around. They have to straw up their investment somehow. So now they're leaning back into entertainment, whether it's the Aces or the A's or the Golden Knights. Now there is a bona fide reason for people to come out there, and while you're here, why not bet on the side? As opposed to being like, come on to Vegas, get rich, and then see a show and leave.
Yeah, and I'm still wondering if Pete Rose will ever get into the Hall of Fame. There's some conjecture, whether he should be or not. So that was, 35 years ago? So that is incredible. And just to correct, the Marlins beat the Braves in 6 games in 1997, not 7 games. So I want to correct that. So for the folks out there, I don't know why I said 7, but it was 6 games. So, but yeah, what other ballparks are you going to try to visit this summer? Because I got Cincinnati on my list. So what is on your list to go visit?
So the first week of June, I'm doing the East Coast swing here. So I'm going to land in Baltimore and then take the overnight train to Washington. So that'll be the Orioles, the Nats, then head over to Philly, see the Phillies. That's a team is called Philly, even though they're in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird name, right? The LA, Los Angeles, and Anaheim. And then finally in Boston. So those 4. So Baltimore, Washington, Philadelphia, and Boston. I'm trying to see if I can add a couple like loosey-goosey ones.
Nice.
Because basically after that would be the big central road trip, right? The to Ohio, the Toronto, the Pittsburghs. You could always drive around, but St. Paul is by itself. Atlanta's kind of by itself. Toronto's kind of by itself on my ones that are left.
Wow, that's going to be fun. You'll love Nats Park. It's a great ballpark. It's very spacious. Concourses are very spacious. It's a great place. You can see the Capitol if you sit in the upper deck facing out the stadium.
Hey.
So I think you'll really enjoy it. It's a great place to watch it. And
cheap seats. I'm getting it. All cheap seats.
Yeah, I'm going to get that. I don't know if they have the all-inclusive in Cincinnati, but I'm going to give it a shot. And if they do, we'll do the all-inclusive. But it may do the cheap seats as well, because if we get that Bengals game, and that's going to cost a pretty penny. So got to go see Joe. Got to go see Joe Burrow.
Cheap, man.
No, they're not cheap. They're not cheap. They're not cheap.
Yeah.
We have a interest of another topic is professional wrestling, and I did So I wanted to talk about a little bit about storylines and things of that nature. So what part of the wrestling that you like? Who are your wrestlers that you follow and all that good stuff? And I'll give you mine.
Oh, sure. Like follow now or back then?
Let's go a little nostalgia. Let's go back then.
Okay. So I always tell people there's three elements of professional wrestling. There's characters, there's wrestling, the moves and holes in the storylines, and that's how I appreciate wrestling in that order. I think cool characters are what you think about when you try to import ideals from. The Rock was confidence, John Cena was strength, the moves and holes. I love when he body slams this guy, or he has this one move where he twists his leg. And then if a story is compelling enough, you can be hooked like a story, like a soap opera. That's kind of the way I look at it first. So the character has to be on point. As a kid, now just for a context, I was born in 1985 and I got into wrestling in 1992, 93. I was into Razor Ramon. I was into Tatanka and Duke the Dumpster Droese. Because I thought, wow, Duke Droese was so strong that he picks up trash during the week and wrestles on the weekends. I mean, that guy was the strongest guy ever in wrestling. And those were my favorite ones growing up. Now, I'm a Sheamus guy. I like Carmelo Hayes. I do like what's going on in SmackDown with LA Knight. I'm a big Roman Reigns guy as well. It's kind of like open to the actual show and spectacle now. But back then, I was a character guy.
Yeah, it was back in the 80s, early 80s. I remember going to the old Boston Garden, seeing Andre the Giant, Paul, Mr. Wonderful Orndorff, Chief Jay Strongbow, Junkyard Dog, all those characters and wrestlers back when it was called the WWF. It was
Correct.
The old days, and those were you had the TV shows and you had some house shows, but I remember going to those wrestling matches and like here in Memphis, Jerry the King Lawler was huge and still is huge here. So wrestling has a legacy here in Memphis, Tennessee, but Boston and New York definitely, Boston especially, had a huge following for wrestling in the early 80s. And then when I go to the 90s, I have to say the best storyline of all time is the NWO and WCW. And I had to go back and look today. July 7th, 1996, Daytona Beach. It consisted of Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Six-Pac. And I'll tell you what, that was the best storyline when Hollywood Hulk Hogan turned bad guy. I loved it. It was awesome.
Who's the third man? It's funny you mention that because I was in Memphis like a couple of years ago, 6 years ago now. The only bad time I had in Memphis was eating the food at Jerry Lawler's, but the memorabilia was great. It's funny because wrestling is one of those things that I got through my dad. My parents are immigrants. They came to the United States in the 70s in New York. And so I don't have to tell you that New York in the 70s wasn't the best place on earth, right? You've seen the Warriors, right? But my dad, being an immigrant from the West Indies, when he went to the Garden to watch wrestling, and he swears back then wrestling was real back then, his guy was Chief Jay Strongbow. And it was funny because he sat in the crowd and felt like he was an American. Like no one cared where he was from.
Right.
No one cared about his accent. During a wrestling that we all cheered for Chief Jay Strongbow. And I messed up because I told him that Chief Jay Strongbow wasn't actually Native American. He was an Italian guy. He was Italian that Vince McMahon Sr. was like, hey, look, we already got Bruno Sammartino. We don't need two Italians. Be something else. But that kind of killed the mystique for him. But the idea was like, no one cared who you are, where you came from. We all came, we bought a ticket, we saw the spectacle, we went home, and we talked about our friends and at work the next Monday about who beat who with what move. And that's so cool about combat, especially entertainment with wrestling,
Yeah, and the way the WWF back in the mid-'80s, there was the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. So Hulk Hogan was all the real American, came out with the video with Rick Derringer and the motorcycle and the kids coming around the motorcycle. If you got to check that video out, it's a great song, but it's a cool video. And Hulk's playing the guitar. He's probably, I don't know if he's playing the guitar really, but it was a great, great video. And it really personified, he was going against the Russian, Volkov, I think it was his name. And then he had the Iron Sheik. You had the Iron Sheik. And you had that dynamic of United States, Soviet Union, Cold War. Somehow, I mean, it was pretty. The crowd was totally into it as far as, when he would wrestle Volkov of the Soviet Union, or the Iron Sheik, or Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant was a massive, massive human being. I saw him at the old Boston Garden. He was just massive.
Oh, yeah, that's what I hear. I haven't had the pleasure, but yeah, I see the pictures and things for scale, and I go, oh my goodness, like how he held a beer can like in the middle of the palm of his hand and all that. Well, I like the fact that the storylines do take a little bit of realism. When I came up, there was the whole beat up your boss, right? Austin versus McMahon, or when Jack Swagger became a Tea Party candidate, and it was the We the People, the Mex America stuff, and even Muhammad Hassan, when he was considered a Muslim American person who was a victim of prejudice in his own country because he was Muslim. There is a bit of fun with realism and twisting it for wrestling, because these are conflicts that we want to see played out in a physical nature, because things like freedom and harmony, they're nice concepts, but if you see a body slam from freedom, you go, yeah, USA, take that guy down. And it's so much fun to watch, man. It really is. And it's kind of a reflection, like baseball, onto ourselves.
Yeah, it is. And, when you think about I always used to love the NWO when they would come out in the ring. And I remember there used to be a few episodes when they start Monday Nitro, and they'd have like these two no-name guys wrestling, okay? And then all of a sudden, after about 30 or 40 seconds into the match, you'd have the NWO music coming out, and they come down and like body slam the wrestlers and be standing over them with their feet on their chests like NWO. And it was I thought that was great. And when Goldberg came on the scene, it was Goldberg versus the NWO, and then that famous match in Atlanta in July of 1998 when he beat Hulk Hogan for the championship. That the Georgia Dome was completely sold out. I remember that. I'll check up on it every now and then on YouTube. But Goldberg was just like spearing and tackling people, like destroying people week after week.
Talk about wish fulfillment, right? How many times have we sat in a meeting? He's like, look, this is a waste of my time. I want to flip this table and walk out. And that's what NWO was doing. But when we're kids and we're in the sandbox playing with our G.I. Joes or Barbies, not here to judge, we kind of put things together. That was kind of our Goldberg. Here's somebody who comes out, beats everybody up, and that was it. And you had these two forces, the epitome of cool and disruption, and this unstoppable force having this matchup. I mean, that pays money, and it was kind of cool to see that in my lifetime. I was a preteen, which is pretty much the ideal demographic for pro wrestling, because I'm hooked for life now. It was great.
Yeah, I remember when Goldberg came on the scene, he was wrestling Bam Bam Bigelow. He wrestled all these guys who were supposed to be bad dudes and things like that. And he would just go ahead and spear them. And I mean, these guys, I'm not kidding. These guys were literally like gasping for air. I'm surprised he didn't kill somebody with those tackles, those spears that he did. It was just, it was incredible. I remember he did one to Chris Jericho as well. And it was just unbelievable. I always liked that dynamic of Goldberg against the NWO. I always thought that was great.
Yeah, who's next? I know Bret Hart didn't like that at all, but yeah, you're right. And people always drag WCW for saying, look, Goldberg was the only star they created, but it is really hard to capture the collective imaginations of people, especially now when everyone kind of identifies with what they believe in and who they vote for. It's very hard to get everyone behind a guy. And Goldberg was one of the few guys to do that, and to do that for so long, to the fact that when he was brought back by the WWE a couple of years ago in his early 50s, because he wanted to show his kid that he used to wrestle, people were still on board because there were just all these core memories of him doing that when they were younger.
I remember in the mid-90s, it was like from 95 to 99, every Monday night I'd watch Nitro and I'd tape Raw, and then I'd watch it the Tuesday afterward too, just to make sure I didn't miss anything. But I always loved it. And I also loved WCW. I remember there was an episode where they had all the wrestlers at the TD Garden in the mid-90s. I think it was like 96 or 97. And they used to have these cutaways at the end of the thing. And there was 50 wrestlers in the walkway to the ring. They're all punching each other. And I thought that was great. I haven't seen that on YouTube, but I remember that. It was all these guys just beating the hell out of each other. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I always wonder that question. If you hate somebody and you're backstage, why not fight them there? Like this, you were like in the bathroom, like, you know what? I don't like your face, and such swinging.
Yeah, I always felt the WWE and the WCW. It was a good competition in the mid '90s, and WCW had the ratings there with the NWO. That storyline was just phenomenal. It was just like you had to watch it. In just like Hulk Hogan, I mean, he was a huge good guy before he went to the NWO. He was massive. I think he's probably the most popular, in my opinion, one of the most popular wrestler in the history of professional wrestling.
How did you, if you take the Hollywood Hogan part of his career out, so let's say the Hulkamania Rock Wrestling doesn't exist, the Voodoo Child doesn't exist. If you just had Hollywood Hogan, is Hollywood Hogan alone worthy of a Hall of Fame entry?
I believe so, and I think he is because, he wrestled the likes of Andre the Giant, and he wrestled, but I think his popularity was absolutely off the charts, number one. He connected with young children, and he didn't seem like a bad guy, and I think that he really was the good guy, and I think he's probably at the top of the list. If you had to, just with professional wrestling, I think he would be at the top of the list. As far as number two, you could have a debate, maybe. Remember, oh yeah, Macho Man Randy Savage.
Yeah, man. So many Slim Jims were eaten because of that. So I told
get your Slim Jim here. And Hulk Hogan. Let me tell you something, brother.
Right.
I used to like that.
It's funny because as someone that grew up in New York, right? So my local wrestling federation was World Wrestling Federation. So the time I got to be a fan, he was already gone. Hogan was already down south in WCW. So my first memories of Hulk Hogan was a guy from Thunder in Paradise. You can imagine that. So imagine knowing a guy from a talking boat show, and then seeing him wrestle. So
when he became the part of the NWO, I mean, he was really like, he totally changed his appearance. He changed, he had like the black scruffy mark. He got rid of like the blonde hair. He had the black clothes and the black wrestling tights and all that stuff. And it really added to it, the new bandana on the head, because he used to have the headband. And I saw him wrestle. They had a wrestling match. It was called King of the Ring. Our local radio station in Boston did it in 85 or 86, and we had ringside seats. And I have some pictures of him, Orndorff, Junkyard Dog. I got to find those. But I got one with his tank top shirt, American made, and he's holding a flag, and he's walking by. I got to find that photo, but he was massive. He was.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a bit of a tease this week on WWE Raw programming about the Royal Rumble is coming up this Saturday as I record this. And so Hulk Hogan is like, you'll never know. I may be in one. And I'm like, really? Are you kidding me, bro? You're like 65.
You know what I do love, too? I love it, too, when they bring back, like, wrestlers from the previous generations or previous decades. And they bring him back onto the current one, like when they bring back Shawn Michaels or Kurt Angle, or the nostalgia part is really tremendous. I think Shawn Michaels had the best entrance song of all time. I think it was just the way he came in, the song, everything. I think it was the best entrance.
Correction, Hogan 70. Yeah, I think every wrestling fan at some point has looked in the mirror and said, hands off the merchandise. Like, it's kind of like a rite of passage. I'm sorry. I'm sure you have a lovely wife, but she's not in the room. You do one of these. Like.
So I saw something the other day. Wrestling is going to be going to WWE is going to be going to Netflix. Is that correct?
Yeah, so just I'm not sure if your fans are wrestling fans. So WWE has 3 brands: Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. I kind of watch them all religiously, and so each of them have different TV rights. So NXT was on USA; it's moving to CW. SmackDown was on Fox; it's moving to USA, and Monday Night Raw is moving over to Netflix. And if you live outside of the US, the entire WWE library is moving over to Netflix starting in
Wow.
January. So the flagship show is going streaming. There's been a bit of debate there because on one hand, WWE got twice as much money per episode. It's on a platform that's established like Netflix. But on the other hand, if you're strictly a cable person, like most of us who live in rural communities are, Netflix isn't at the expense if you haven't had it already. So there's been kind of back and forth about that. But yeah, January 2025, bam, it's Netflix City for Monday Night Raw.
Wow. So that is incredible. I love talking wrestling. One other story, I remember when I was living in Miami in 95, we went to a house show at the old Miami Arena, and it was a house show, and we got there, and the guy I worked with, we were there, he says, see that guy there? That's The Rock. That's Dwayne Johnson there. He used to play football at the University of Miami in a house show, and like 30 years later, he's like the #1 movie star in the world and one of the most recognizable people in the world. So it's amazing how he has transformed.
Oh, hold on, Rob. Hold on.
I'm serious.
Stop the bus. No. I agree with that part. But you were in Montreal for the All-Star game. You live in Memphis. You live in Miami. How many lives have you lived there, Rob?
Well,
are you a superhero? Are you a spy? What's going on?
I'm not a spy. See, when you work, like back in the day when I worked in Miami, we used to get free tickets from the beer companies because we worked there. We were able to get free passes and things, free tickets. So, yeah, it's just I remember seeing that, and it was a lot of fun. And I still remember him saying, that's Dwayne Johnson. I was like, and then like all of a sudden, it's like I look back at that day and look at him. But yeah, it's I try to do different things. I try to see different things. I like looking at the inner workings, having worked in the business for a while. I like the inner workings, like checking out the arenas and the stadiums and the pregame and all that stuff. And obviously the game and people watch as well. So I kind of do it all. But yeah, it's been fun, and I enjoy it. It's not the conventional
Nothing
way.
more valuable than there's nothing more valuable than life well lived, man. That's congrats. But meet The Rock, sheesh. That's
but that was like I couldn't believe it. It was like he had lived in Miami all his life, so he had watched Hurricane football, so he knew all the players. And he said, pointed him out, and he said, "That's The Rock. He could be the next great one." So, and lo and behold, almost 30 years later, he's part of the UFL. The Memphis Showboats will be playing this year. I'll go check out a couple of games. So I'm looking forward to that. So,
wait, how do you feel about that? Because I was a hardcore XFL person, and I'm kind of bummed out about this merger. I don't know.
I'm a USFL guy. I'm nostalgic because I remember the early 80s when they came out with the New Jersey Generals and the Boston Breakers. Had a team. They played at Nickerson Field at Boston University when they came out in the early 80s. They wouldn't let them play at Foxborough Sullivan Stadium. But I'm more of a nostalgia guy, but I like the USFL. I'm glad they kept the Showboats. That's the original USFL franchise. So I think it's going to be good combining these. Hopefully they can get a strong turnout. So this year I'm going to plan on going to a couple of games at the Liberty Bowl and checking it out.
All right. Well, I'm tired of picking teams because in XFL 1, I was a Memphis Maniacs guy. XFL 2, the New York Guardians. XFL 3, I was Seattle Sea Dragons, and I'm just burnt.
I like the Memphis Showboats. I like the nostalgic, the part of it. Reggie White played for them before he went to the Packers, but I think that they'll do well, and they did that announcement on TV a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact. So I thought that was pretty neat. Mm-hmm. So. Talk about your podcast as well. You've interviewed you've had a chance to talk to some great athletes, I presume, and talk about your podcast because I'm really looking forward to hearing about that again.
Yeah, I actually have multiple, but the one you're referring to is one called the Black Baseball Mixtape. That's a show that takes a look at baseball through the lens of fans of color. It's not my show. I'm a contributor on it. I'm a co-host on it. Mark Cheatham, aka Cheats, that's his baby. He started two years ago, launched with a blog, and it's grown by so much. I mean, we've linked up with the Players Alliance, CC Sabathia, Chris Grandison, that group. MLB is aware of us. We're the ones that to go to Dubai to cover the Baseball United launch. We went to the Bahamas in December to cover Jazz Chisholm, Don't Blink in Paradise, Home Run Derby. It's become a real media platform because there wasn't a platform for Black fans of baseball that was beyond just asking where's Black people in baseball, which is a good and valid question, but we want something a bit more robust. We want to be able to be a destination for those fans of color. So being able to have a community on Discord, and we had these community conversations on Sundays, and I had a chance to speak with Barry Larkin and Adrian Beltre and Albert Pujols. Just to name a few, it's been a lot of fun, a cool ride for as long as I've been a part of the group.
God, you got it pretty awesome too. And Beltre.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got Albert Pujols and Barry Larkin. I mean, you can't go wrong with those three. That must have been a great experience.
It was a great experience, but you know what's really cool? That they just want to be liked. It's like they're like us. They have feelings like you don't know how to approach it, right? You would think they'd be one way, but they're not. Everyone's been so cool when I got a chance to speak with them because they know what's at stake. They know that they have what they contributed, what they mean to people. They also know that it's a blessing and a dream to make it to that level for that long. It's a really cool conversation that we had a couple of times having them on the show.
That is incredible. So how did you have to book them? How far do you have to book them in advance, or is it something that you had to do like when you were at the functions?
So everything's a little bit different. So like the prospects and the executives, I mean, prospects are always available because they need to play ball. Executives can play a little bit of that corporate tag, you know. The time I got a chat with those guys, Pujols and them, they were all investors in Baseball United, which was the league out there in the Middle East and Southern Asia. So I went out there to cover the showcase last November, and there were times during the day where they would walk the field and see how the investment's going, and I would just pull them aside and say, hey, look, 2 minutes of your time. I promise I won't bore you. And if I do, you're allowed to walk away mid-question. That's what I would tell them to break the ice.
Wow.
And so I will give them these questions to make sure they stick with it. So
that's awesome. That is tremendous. That is, and I hope to get to see the Reds this year. Ellie De La Cruz. I remember one sequence last year. He is like the most dynamic young player in baseball where he stole second base, third base, and home. Like within I don't know, it was incredible. It was just like I have to go back and look at it. It was just one of the most dynamic plays I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's very interesting how a team that can be seen as underachieving, the Lee's a very, very small spark. I mean, Ellie's one person. The Reds fell out right before the playoffs, so they weren't even a playoff team. But that summer, that's all you're talking about was, man, the NL Central is up for upheaval because the Cardinals could have put 2 and 2 together after Yadier Molina retired. But then you have this reason, like I call it the souvenir cup quotient. All right. That's why I love David Wright so much, because there was dark times in Queens, but David Wright showed up every day and he played this hard out, and people will cling to that and go, hey, look, if we're losing, it's one thing. At least this guy's trying. No one likes going to a game where a team is not even trying and they lose. And so it's so much fun. Hopefully you get team more of the success next year.
Yeah, I'm looking. Hopefully, we get to see him. But he hit 13 home runs, 44 ribbies, and 91 hits. But this year, I think he's going to break it out, and I'm looking forward to it. But I find that fascinating about the players that you talk to. That's pretty awesome. I mean, Albert Pujols, one of the top players in baseball history. That must have been off your bucket list.
Yeah, it's funny because my bucket list only has one person on it, maybe 1.5. 1.5, because I say 1.5 because the other one was Bartolo Colon, and he was there, but I didn't really know what to ask him, so I failed. I had my chance and screwed it up. But when I was a kid, I was a big Frank Thomas guy, and if I got a chance to talk to Frank Thomas, then I can say that I've hit everyone I always wanted to. So I think that one might be the starstruck one for me.
Cut off on the last episode, we were talking about, you had a story. There's a story about Ken Griffey Jr. saying he would rather retire than play for the Yankees. What is that story? Because I find it to be unbelievable.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny because we're talking about the Reds, right? Because that's where Jr. eventually went to, and he's still getting paid by the Reds, by the way. He's like the 4th highest player on that team. Hashtag deferred contracts. But during the free agency period after Seattle, there was a talk about, hey, will Junior go to the Yankees? And the story went that at the time, Junior said, look, I would rather retire than play for the Yankees. Like, what do you mean by that? That's all I'm saying. Professional. Years later, it had come out that when his dad, Ken Griffey Sr., played for the Yankees late in his career, that he would go to work and hang out with dad. And on a given day, he would go out in the dugout, maybe, chat up with dad, hang out with him, chew sunflower seeds, shot a couple balls or whatever. And they got pulled aside one day Senior did, and said, "Hey, look, we're not allowing any kids in the dugout. You have to clear out your son just for safety reasons or whatever." Meanwhile, other players who were not the same skin color as the Griffeys had their kids like in the outfield on the grass, having a good time. And the way Junior tells it, he goes, "I saw the defeat in my dad's eye. Like, look, it is what it is, man. I'm late in my career. I'm just here to get my check and put my head down."
Wow.
But Junior knew back then that he could not support an organization that would support that kind of behavior. So it's a lot of truth to that. Ken Griffey Jr. said, "Look, I will do anything but play for the New York Yankees." And well, I was never huge on Griffey. I think then when I heard that story, I was like, "Yep, that guy's an old timer."
Yeah, and the 95 ALDS against the Yankees, I think that pretty much epitomized it. 5 home runs against the Yankees. They came back from going down 0-2, win it in 5 games in a dramatic bottom of the ninth play where Edgar Martinez drove them home from first base. And absolutely incredible series that was with the Yankees in 1995. If you want some good adrenaline, watch the last inning, bottom half of that inning. It's about 7 minutes on YouTube. That'll get your juices flowing for baseball season. It's one of the most dramatic playoff series in baseball history. And Griffey had that run from first base to home plate. Absolutely spectacular run, dramatic run. You can't put enough words on it. That run where he slid in and then he's jumped up and A-Rod grabs him and he gets mobbed at home plate. I find that to be pretty cool.
That's what makes baseball cool, man. Swing man, the kid, love it.
Kid, I remember Brent Musburger. The kid has done it again. Put it on the scoreboard. I remember that. That was great. But that Kingdome, boy, that place was rocking. That place was rocking in 95. Yeah. And they used to have these overhead shots where they threw the fireworks looking down, and you'd see Griffey running around after his home run trot. I thought that was great camera angle right there with the crowd going crazy. So I thought that was pretty cool. That's a tremendous story. That just unbelievable. I mean, he remembers that all these years, and I think maybe that had a little adrenaline in 95 for him. I really do. Now that I've heard that story.
Yeah, it was one. Oh, that totally works out. I mean, we all want a little chip on our shoulder, but we never think about how we got that chip.
Is there a player you think that may have a chip on their shoulder as they played that had a great career? Maybe they got overlooked?
So it's funny you say that because on the Black Baseball mixtape, I have become the biggest Tommy Pham cheerleader ever. Tommy Pham is a guy that if you don't know his story or what he's about, all you hear is the bad stuff. You heard about him being stabbed at a strip club. You hear about him punching out Jock Peterson at a game, all these bad things. But then you think about, here's somebody who is from a mixed heritage, right? He's a quarter Vietnamese, quarter black, quarter white, or half white. His dad is not even in his life. So he basically raised himself out of Las Vegas, has a degenerative eye condition. He is literally going blind every single day and has to go and do extra batting practice to calibrate his vision to play. And he's still the better hitter in baseball. In July of 2023, he was second in the majors in OPS behind Shohei Ohtani. Are you kidding me? That guy does not get nearly as much recognition as he deserves. I'm a huge Tommy Pham fan. Chip on his shoulder. See his interviews. They're so rough around the edges. Takes you back to the 80s of baseball. Love it.
That is unbelievable. I can't believe I haven't heard that story. That is a remarkable story.
YouTube it. Tommy Pham eye disease.
I'm gonna watch him this upcoming season. I can't wait. Spring training's just around the corner. We're talking probably 2 or 3 weeks before pitchers and catchers report. And then he's
currently a free agent, and I don't know why.
Yeah,
So last year he was a Met, and the big athletic thing came out where he was like, the Mets don't work hard enough, and that was the big pull.
Oh yeah,
but he was right because he had a certain way of doing things, and I guess we got complacent in our thing. And I remember Francisco Lindor, which I consider my captain, even though no one else does, says, "Thank you for teaching me how to work hard again." But goes to Arizona, and Arizona, this 80+ win team, goes to the World Series. That's not a coincidence, Rob. Not a coincidence.
No, I agree. Players, change the scenery, and, maybe he spoke the truth because the Mets were favored last year with, was it Verlander, Scherzer's pitchers, and then they had that lineup, and then halfway through, they just started selling, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Amazing. Yeah, I get it.
It's just the amazing Mets, they used to call them, the amazing Mets. But, that's incredible. But, well, Flobo, I want to thank you very much for coming back on, and I know that your schedule is very busy, and where can you hear your podcast?
Well, thank you so much for having me. Anytime to have an excuse to yell into a microphone, just say the word. So many different podcasts you can hear my voice on. You could probably just Google it at this point. But the one we mentioned today is called the Black Baseball Mixtape with Mark Cheatham. Make sure you follow that at Black Baseball Mixtape on Instagram. I usually do most of my content as kind of like a man on the street thing on the Instagram page. So at Black Baseball Mixtape on Instagram, check out that content.
All right. Well, Flobo, thanks a lot. Peace. And I hope to talk to you again maybe when baseball's rolling in the summer.
All right. Catch you later.